Welcome to the breakdown where we break down all the messed up horror movies. Today we look at Apollo 18, Blair Witch in Space, directed by Gonzalo Lopez Gallego, which touts itself as true footage showing why we stopped going to the moon. Lately I've been so perplexed recently by the Apollo 11 moon landing. How audacious, impressive, and amazing it was, how 3 people went to space knowing full well thousands of things could go wrong and spell their death, but they landed on an object long admired throughout human history and came back home to show us. I wanted to take a break from really disturbing stuff because I've been a little mentally unwell, so I figured it would be fun to look at something inspiring and intimidating like the Apollo moon landings. In real life, Apollo 18 was canceled because it was too expensive and we already been to the moon like 6 times, but in this movie, Apollo 18 was hidden because the astronauts found horror on the moon that might spell doom for all humanity. Will they survive their moon landing and get back home to their families, or will all be lost? Yes, the movie is on Tubi and free on YouTube. Let me show you why we never go back to the moon. Cue the Gohan. So the Saturn V is the rocket that shoots into outer space, and after exiting Earth, it splits apart into the Command and Service Module, or the CSM, holding the astronauts, carrying a lunar module, or LM, all the way to the moon. Then, 2 astronauts descend upon the moon in the lunar module, while the one lonely astronaut waits in lunar orbit around the moon. The moonwalkers do their mission, and then use the lunar module's ascent stage to return to lunar orbit and dock back with the CSM. After docking, they go back to Earth, and they did all that with computers less powerful than the device you're watching the video on. We are introduced to the Apollo 18 crew 2 years after the final moon landing, Apollo 17. The Apollo 18 crew are going to the moon to deliver technology that would warn of missile launches from the Soviet Union. The astronauts are scared to death. That's because this mission is more doing the government's dirty work than actually needing to go to the moon. And so now the Saturn V launches the astronauts up and away from home to explore the cosmos once again. Finally, they reach the moon and undock the lunar module to descend upon the moon. John Gray here stays in lonely lunar orbit inside the Command and Service Module, while Ben Anderson and Nathan Walker descend inside the lunar module to land on the moon. That was the scariest part so far. I guess they waited until Apollo 18 to put a camera inside the lunar module, but they do the usual astronaut checklist on the moon, and then here's the payload. They start the device that'll track Soviet missiles and pick up more moon rocks, and I'm sure it's seeming like they're not the only ones here. Okay, that was the first EVA done, which is just their moon mission for today. Man, I don't think I could ever sleep when I'm on another planet. I can barely sleep when I'm in another house. But there are noises. Plus, there's radio interference that NASA back home is being a little too quiet about. First day done, now it's time for EVA 2. Dude, you're shaving on the moon? Just wait till you get home. It's only a few days. They activate tech relating to the missile detection systems and find footprints. Wait, no, these footprints are different. Someone was walking on the moon in some house shoes. Houston, we have a problem. There are other footprints on the moon. Let's get up out of there and let them have it. Following the footprints, the astronauts find a Soviet lunar module. The Soviet Union also landed on the moon in this movie, but the lunar module is still here. That means the cosmonauts died and the mission was a failure. Climbing inside of the Soviet lunar lander, they find the place trashed. That would be so cool to meet other humans on the moon like that. So I doubt NASA would let these astronauts go on this silly adventure. They'd probably tell them to go back to the lunar module and get ready to fly up out of there. In a dark crater, one of them finds a dead Soviet cosmonaut without his helmet on. Inside of the United States lunar module, they talk to Houston, telling them the Soviets landed cosmonauts on the moon. But NASA acts like a bunch of smooth brain idiots. We just saw a dead cosmonaut, but NASA tells them to just continue the mission. Yet things get worse and worse. Something is toying with the astronauts and steals the American flag like a class clown. They think a random cosmonaut might have stolen the flag and killed the other cosmonaut found earlier. Such a random string of thought. These cosmonauts been dead for a while, and even if there was one left, he's running out of oxygen by now. Finally, it's time to lift off and return to Earth. The astronauts prepare for the ascent stage to return to the CSM in lunar orbit, but something steals the camera recording and then Ben shakes the lunar module and they lose communications. They can't get back to Earth unless they have communications, so they prepare another EVA to figure out why they can't communicate, thinking an antenna is broken. They still think another cosmonaut is just exploring the moon and bullying them. Eventually, they do imagine that aliens are on the moon. Suddenly, something starts attacking Nathan, who is outside the ship. Literally, a moon spider is attacking him inside the suit. So what is your next move right here? Are you going to go outside and rescue Nate, or are you going to tell Nate's family you did all you could? He goes out and rescues Nate, who is barely breathing, and manages to keep him breathing, but weirdly, he denies anything weird happened to him. Meanwhile, in lunar orbit, John is pissed at NASA for ignoring their calls for help. Speaking of, they struggle to comprehend aliens attacking them. The most disturbing moment is when the spider that attacked him went inside of Nathan's body. In a scene that'll make you uncomfortable, Ben digs the moon rock out of his body, and then Nathan breaks the rock on board the ship for some reason, contaminating the entire lunar module. The two astronauts figure that NASA abandoned them up there, knowing aliens are on the moon, guinea pigs to examine alien life on the moon at the cost of their lives. Nathan is infected, bloodshot eyes and veins popping out. My most enjoyed moment is how the movie cares about how it represents the moon landings. And plus, here's a callback. Nathan talks to himself saying, "Fate has ordained the men who went to the moon to explore in peace, remain on the moon to rest in peace." This is actually a part of an alternate speech that President Nixon would have given had the Apollo 11 astronauts got stuck on the moon. It's been 6 days now. Oxygen is running low, and they both imagine they will die. He says they will eventually abandon their lunar module and return to the Soviet lunar lander to use their oxygen and communication systems. All while Nathan is infected, he's about to be left on the damn moon. Really, that's probably the best thing for him to do. Let Nathan's oxygen run out and he just pass out and die. For some reason, Nathan tries breaking the cameras inside of the lunar module. He went crazy, and his hammering instead breaks the entire ship, and it begins to depressurize. Now, they no longer have a breathable environment and should quickly put on their spacesuits and life support equipment. If communication were active, they should immediately start the ascent stage and dock with John, who is still in lunar orbit. But since communication is failing, they can't perform the ascent and docking without risk of wasting fuel or just getting lost in space. So, they get on the rover and drive to the Soviet lunar lander, but Nathan goes crazy again because of the infection, crashing the rover, and the cameras finally pick up the creepy spider aliens on the moon. Ben is still alive, and with his dwindling oxygen supply, makes his way to the Soviet lander. He finds Nathan still walking, but Nathan tells him to find the Soviet ship and save himself. "Leave me here and survive," before he gets dragged below by the aliens. The aliens camouflage themselves as moon rocks, and Ben races away to find the Soviet lander. He gets inside, and luckily, the systems aren't too different from the American lunar module. He uses the communication systems, reaching communications with the Soviet Union space program, but the Soviets give him a secure line to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, a United States official who tells Ben they can't bring him home because they believe he is infected. Ben begs for help, but they tell him they will let his family know he died a hero. "Okay, Ben, I feel you. Now it's time to make peace," which he does by listening to recordings his family left him. But randomly, John, who is still in lunar orbit, makes contact with the Soviet lander, and he can talk to Ben. Ben tells him the long story, and they plan on Ben piloting the Soviet lander. However, the Soviet lander can't dock with the American CSM, so Ben will have to fly up and synchronize orbit with the CSM, and then do a spacewalk to get inside. Right before ascending into orbit, Nathan returns, wanting to get inside, and starts breaking the window to the Soviet lander before getting attacked by more moon aliens, eating him from the inside and dragging him away. Finally, Ben starts liftoff, but meanwhile, the Deputy Secretary of Defense tells John in lunar orbit to not recover Ben, who is flying to meet him. If he doesn't abort the rescue and let Ben die, then they will cut off communications, which will doom both astronauts to run out of life support and be lost in space. John says real real homies don't leave each other and ignores them. Ben is flying, but space rocks float next to him, showing themselves as aliens. Infected and crazed, Ben doesn't slow down his ascent and crashes into the CSM, killing both astronauts. NASA reports each astronaut died in plane crashes over the ocean, making their bodies unrecoverable. Officially, Apollo 17 is the final moon mission. But the film also states that 840 pounds of lunar rock samples were brought to Earth and given to foreign countries, many of which are now stolen, hinting that the rocks were just camouflaged aliens who are now going to invade. Honestly, even if he managed to get into orbit along with John, it would have been hard to perform a spacewalk to him. I actually really liked this movie. It was cool. I gave it a C, maybe even a B-. I wish we could have seen the aliens more. I'm not the biggest fan of found footage horror films, but this was okay. Plus, it is inspired by the space missions that really mean a lot to me, so it was fun watching it. Can you comment down below any space movies that you think I should make a video on? I'm still in the space rabbit hole, but that's precisely why you should watch this video on the greatest alien ripoff by the Horror Geek, so he can put you onto some horror that you had no idea was so terrifying. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to see more messed up movies. Thanks for watching. Spooky out.